Hi everyone. Today we have Federal Member of Parliament for Parramatta, Ms. Julie Owens MP, to discuss about the latest ban on travel to India or from India by Australian government. Let's go in. We have a lot of questions to ask about it. Hi Julie, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. In what is a terrible time for a lot of people in my community, but we're doing the best we can.
Really? Cool, no problem. So the first thing is, as you know at the moment, so the very much affecting or the very key issue which is creating a hassle in Indian community is this travel ban by Australian government to or from India, including citizens. So how do you see this ban as a fellow Australian citizen?
Look, I think every time I hear the Prime Minister say we have to threaten Australian citizens with jail to protect Australians, I want to scream at the TV, they are Australians. The 10,000 Australians in India at the moment are Australians. So it's as if suddenly they're not. When I hear that statement, I think it's as if the government is ignoring the fact that these are Australians. But the other thing that comes to mind immediately is that it's been over a year now since people started to be stuck. You know, there are 10,000 Australians stuck in India now, and some of them have been stuck there since March last year, trying to get home. I've had, you know, we have people phoning the office every day with dreadful stories of separation. You know, a husband who flew home early because he and his wife were over there because his wife was pregnant and they were spending some time with her mum. And then she was going to come back 2 weeks later. The flights got cancelled, then she couldn't fly, and he still hasn't met his child, you know, 10 months later. You know, dreadful stories. So for the last year, the government has not done what I would have expected an Australian government to do, which is find a way to get Australians home before the situation escalated as it has. So this situation that's happening now with so many, you know, Indian Australians and other Australians, you know, stuck in India, is not the end of it. This is going to happen again. There will be a need for surge capacity in our quarantine system for quite some time, and we've had a year to build it, and we haven't. So it's been a long, long process of not acting as the federal government should have. And now we're in a crisis mode, and the government is threatening citizens who haven't been able to come home for a year with jail if they try. I mean, this is, and I know they've backed off on that, and so they should have. But their first instinct was to threaten Australians with jail for trying to get home. To threaten Australians with jail. That's extraordinary. And we are a highly creative country, and I do not believe we couldn't find a number of other things to do as well. You know, even if we did have to delay flights for a couple of weeks because we didn't have room in the quarantine system, what about vaccinations? You know, what about surge capacity? There have to be other things we can do other than say, sorry, you're on your own, come back and we'll jail you. The other side of it, which I find un-Australian, by the way, is the suggestion that Australians in India can't come home to Australia because they'd be threatening Australians, but they can go somewhere else for 2 weeks and then come home. So we've got our cricketers, for example, going elsewhere for 2 weeks. So if it's not okay for Australians to come home because it's not safe, it's also not okay for us to suggest that they can go and risk someone else for 2 weeks. You know, so that too is I find really quite extraordinary. I think sometimes, though, and I know I'm giving a very long answer, but you can hear the frustration in my voice. I heard the Prime Minister say it, you know, early last year when he was still going to the football and the cricket, Australians should come home. And I hear it now too when I've put up the petition. I get occasionally people saying, well, they should have come home already. What are they doing there? Yeah. And that for me is not recognising who we are now. You know, Australians now have relatives all over the world. We have Australians that work in other countries of the world. And if they're working there, they have leases and they have kids in school and they have contracts that they can't break. And, you know, and back in those early days, there were, you know, it wasn't necessarily possible. They weren't tourists, right? Tourists should have come home. Yeah. I'm saying, but it's not possible. There were people who were there because their father had died and they were looking after their mother because there was no one else to do that. There were people who couldn't travel because they were pregnant. There were people who couldn't travel because they had contracts and they were studying, all sorts of reasons. We are not this, you know, we're not the country we were in the 60s. We are all over the world. And people who are stuck in India now have been stuck there for 12 months.
Yeah.
You know, as you would know, I've had people who booked a flight and the flight was cancelled. Then they booked a first-class flight and it was cancelled. And then they booked another one and it was cancelled. So they've had $25,000 tied up in airfares that hasn't been refunded. They've run out of cash. They've spent every cent they had. They're still stuck there. They haven't seen their partner or their, you know, for a year.
Yeah.
And, you know, for every Australian who's stuck in India, there are people here who are just worried every moment of their life. True. You know, worried every day that the family won't make it. And again, even things that you know seem really obvious. If there's 650 people in India who are considered really vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Now they would be people who are at risk of homelessness or they're ill. You know, there are 650 of those. Where are they? You know, where are they? Aren't there creative solutions we can find? Aren't there places in India where they could quarantine for a period? Aren't there? Can we provide additional financial support? Can we send over vaccines? Can we? What? You know, there must be things we can do, because at the moment there are 10,000 Australians in a situation of great risk, of great risk. And we as Australians, you know, and as an Australian government, which I'm not, unfortunately, we have an obligation to care for those Australians.
True.
As best we can. And that for me is the issue, you know, that you know, I could even understand the government saying, again, based on the medical advice, which I don't have, but if the medical advice said that the quarantine system is under such strain because of this, we need to just put a pause for 2 weeks. And that was explained why and how it was going to happen. But the threat of jail raises it to a different level. And the lack of you know, we'll review it in 2 weeks or review it on whatever it is it may, as if rather than we are desperately trying to find other answers.
True.
You know, two ways to look at it. You know, one is, oh, sorry, we'll jail you and we will review it in a couple of weeks. And the other one is, this is terrible. A quarantine can't cope. We have to put a pause on it, but we're desperately trying to find other answers. Yeah. Two ways of looking at it. Yeah. And we are a clever country. I mean, look what we've done already with this. I'm going to stress again that, and I'm going to in some ways excuse some of the broader population that sees this as a case of essentially tourists who didn't come home, you know, or who left Australia to go. There's very little coverage in our mainstream media about what is happening in the world and what our rules are. I doubt that most people out there in the general community actually know that it's really hard to leave Australia at the moment, that there aren't a whole stack of people that have zipped off to India for fun, that it's actually hard to travel at the moment, and that what we're talking about in the main is people who have been over there and got stuck there because the flights got cancelled. And Scott Morrison promised to bring them all home by Christmas. And we've had a year, you know, anyone who was looking ahead would have known back in April and May. I was saying then that it was going to go at least a year. You know, we've had time to find other answers. Cool. We've had time to find other answers. And and the longer we leave it, the more strains there are, the more third and fourth waves there be. You know, India won't be the last country that gets a massive surge. You know, that could happen to in any country. You know, so again, what are the answers here? Yeah. You know, what are the answers?
So Julie, so you have said that India is not only the country which gonna get this surge, any country can get it. So that's where the Honorable Prime Minister Scott Morrison is also saying the same, that this ban is to protect Australians from the third wave of coronavirus. So for some people, they're saying it's a valid reason and there is a justification for this law. But as a people representative, what do you see? Like, do you think that's a justified reason?
I think we're in a situation now because the government didn't act earlier. Where I'm told, again, I'm reading it in the news, I haven't been privy to the medical advice, is that we do have a large number of cases from India in our quarantine system. That apparently is, again, I don't know how that compares to any other circumstance before. I only know that that's what I'm reading in the media now. So again, I could understand the government saying, look, we need to pause arrivals from India because of this reason. What I don't understand is just leaving those Australians out there in a country that doesn't have the medical capacity, that if one of those Australians gets COVID now, they will not have the kind of medical support they need. I also, so I can't understand a government that literally has just washed its hands of 10,000 Australians that are at great risk. I don't believe that there isn't a way to help those Australians be safer. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe there isn't a way to find ways to bring at least some of them home safely. We have, the people, when it broke out in Wuhan, the government sent in a plane and picked up Australians and took them to Christmas Island. They did that. They sent a plane to Wuhan and picked up Australians who were stuck in Wuhan and took them to Christmas Island. There have been situations in the past where they've actually helped. But again, he's right in that what we don't want is a new wave in Australia. We don't want to do something which will actually cause an outbreak in Australia. We don't want to do that. But are we not really smart enough to find a way to help 10,000 Australians be safer than they are now without threatening jail? And I'm going back to that. He threatened jail, right? Yeah. He threatened jail. Surely we can figure out how to do this. Surely we can figure out a way to do this. And there have been suggestions. And again, partly it's because any reasonable person would have knew we were going to find ourselves in this position at some point, and we didn't build for it. But now, right now, we have 10,000 Australians stuck in a country with a COVID tornado going on that doesn't have a health system that can support them, and we have a government that's essentially just washed their hands.
Yep.
So I want to hear from the government, not that they've washed their hands and not that they've backed off from the jail thing. I want to hear how they're going to help those Australians now. Are they going to send vaccines? Are they going to, try and find quarantine locations in India? Are they going to provide better financial support for people? I mean, what are they going to do? What are we going to do for 10,000 Australians in crisis? And of course, we don't want to do something that's going to threaten the rest of the Australian population, the other Australian citizens. Of course, we don't want to do that, but there must be a better solution than this one.
Yep.
There must be.
So, Julie, so you have mentioned that there must be a way to, instead of threatening people or criminalizing the arrival to Australia or out to Australia. So is there any alternate solution or alternate proposal that Australian Labor Party has given to the government in order to avoid this travel ban and also to protect people like the Australian community in Australia?
Well, again, we've been saying for many months now that quarantine is a federal responsibility and they need to take greater responsibility for it. They've managed to pass it to the states, but I'm going to say this. I'm a member of the opposition, right? I'm a member of the opposition. We have a government, and it's up to the government to have the answers. Yeah. It's up to the government to have the answers. They're the ones that are being paid for it. They're the ones that took the responsibility. They're the ones that are happy to take all the glory, if there is any. It's actually their job, with all the resources at their disposal, all the government departments, all the medical advice, all the states behind them. It's up to them to find answers to this. It's not up to me. But we have been calling now for months for the government to take greater responsibility. We've been calling for them to, build specific facilities. And we called right from the beginning of this ban that they really should reverse that. It's good to see the government stepping back from the jailing thing, saying, well, we can't see that anyone would be jailed. But we do have separation of powers here. The law is the law, and the courts determine that, not the government. But it's a government responsibility to find answers to this.
Yep.
We can just keep saying you need to.
Yeah. So I can understand it's a government responsibility to make sure the things has been done properly. But as an opposition party, so as Australian Labor Party, or you as a people representative has taken any excessive measure to put external pressure or any extra pressure onto government in this issue?
Yeah, look, I've got a petition going at the moment called As Un-Australian to ban Australians from returning. It's been up now online for a couple of days, and we've got hundreds of signatures. It's been, you know, really well supported. I'll be presenting that in Parliament next week, so I need as many people to sign it as they can. That's one way of putting pressure on the government. I mean, we've been telling the stories as much as possible as well, the stories of people, you know, so these are not people that nicked off to India on holiday last week. You know, these are people that have been struggling for a year, some more. So we're telling those stories as much as we can. And on the opposition side, you know, we've been calling for an end to this for quite some time. A lot of the state Labor governments are now talking about building their own facilities for quarantine. We've been calling for that for some time. There have been reports for quite a while recommending that, and the government hasn't taken it up. So, you know, it's a government in many ways that doesn't act until there's a crisis, and then even then it acts very slowly. True. And there are 10,000 Australians that, you know, some of whom will probably pay a dreadful price for that.
So Julie, so this action, like banning travel to India, is based on the Biosecurity Act. So this Biosecurity Act gives an exclusive power to Honourable Health Minister and Honourable Prime Minister to, you know, to protect Australia in this pandemic situation. So to a greater extent, some people say this law is the right law or the right act, but some people have concerns saying this act it's against human rights. So how do you see this?
There are two issues with the Biosecurity Act. One is that the Parliament has no oversight at all. Most acts of Parliament have this capacity for, or when ministers do things, the Parliament has the capacity to do what we call disallow them. You know, in this case, there is no oversight by the Parliament. The minister doesn't have to give an explanation, and the Parliament doesn't have the capacity to do that. It's one of a number of pieces of legislation recently that there seems to be an increase in the number of pieces of legislation that the Parliament cannot overrule. Now, there's a long history of that, but that's one of the reasons why, you know, this. Well, it's the nature of the Biosecurity Act. The other part of it, though, is that the minister is supposed to be taking he's supposed to have explored all the other options first. So this is supposed to be, in a sense, the minimalist position. You know, the much bigger solution. You actually look around for other answers as well, and he's required to do that. It's a question of whether he has done that in this case. I'm not a lawyer, so there will be lawyers fighting this out in the courts in no time at all about whether it's constitutional and whether it's, you know, and lawyers will argue that out. I am not a constitutional lawyer. In fact, when I read the information on the delegated instruments, I find it very dense. And I usually go and ask a lawyer to help me understand. It's very complicated law. But it is probably rare in, you know, democracies that this happens. I can't recall it happening in Australia. I don't think it's happened in Australia before. It doesn't happen in the world very often. So this is quite an unusual occurrence where a government would threaten Australian citizens with jail if they return. They have done it when it comes to terrorists, people who have dual citizenship and have served with a terrorist force. They do it there. They've done that there. But this is not threatening people who've done something wrong with jail. This is not. This is, if you know what I mean. It's it's new. It's new. So it will be really interesting to watch what happens in the courts. We will see. But we are one of the, I think, as I understand it, we're the only country in the OECD that doesn't have a Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights would actually protect citizens from being prevented from returning home. We're one of the few developed countries, democratic countries, that doesn't have one, if not the only one. So we're a little different. I was just going to say, watch the cricketers, the Australian cricketers who got so much coverage, you know. It's, but the cricketers have more capacity to find another way to keep safe than most Australians who are overseas. But of the cricketers that were over there for that tournament, all the others have just flown home. The Australians are the only ones that can't.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's so sad. So we have come to the final stage of the interview. So can you just share some words about this issue at the moment as a people representative to the community, Indian community and Australian citizens?
You know, can I just hold a mirror up a little bit and just remind us all how incredibly lucky and well-positioned Australia is because of the presence in our community of the world. You know, as the world gets smaller and the opportunities get greater, Australia is better positioned than any country I can think of to benefit from the changing technology and the changing relationships around the world. We speak every language, we know every culture. There isn't a country we can't, you know, a city we can't navigate without a map. You know, and the Indian Australian community and all of the other communities in our kind of cohort are what makes us strong, right? And sometimes we don't realise exactly how powerful we are as a nation because of our capacity to look at the world from every perspective and through the concepts in every language and through, you know, philosophies that come from centuries and, you know, millennia sometimes. So I really hope that, you know, our Indian Australian community doesn't see this as an attack on them personally, and I know some will. I'm going to give the government the benefit of the doubt that this is actually based on the medical advice, but you know, when this is over, let's just remember capacity that our migrant communities bring to Australia and weave into our community. That's who we are now. That's who we are.
All good. All right, Julie, we are almost done with the interview. Thanks for your time and valuable information regarding and support for the community in regards to this issue.
Okay, thank you.
All good.
Thank you.